Help DVE, help the kids. This September, support the 15th annual DVE Rocks Children's Radiothon broadcast. For 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, September 28th, 29th, and 30th, DVE will be broadcasting live to support the rock stars at UPMC's Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. You can become a Platinum Rock Star too with a $20 a month donation and also be entered to win giveaways. Call in during the live program or visit givetochildrens.org/DVE Rocks to donate.
Hi, this is Matt Parker, author of A Radical Enterprise, and you're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host again, Jay Hersko. Joining me, I have this evening my partner in crime, Mr. Mike Caddell.
Howdy, y'all.
One of the Agile Betties, unfortunately, her partner could not make it this evening, Ms. Janel Lanza.
Hello.
And a first-time attendee joining us from the rough and tumble streets where Rocky got his name, Mr. Abbott Shea. Abbott, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
We are glad to have you. So the topic of this evening, this week's What Have You's episode is unscripted. So just a warning to all you listeners, might get a little interesting. Typically, I have trouble getting out of the intro in the unscripted show. So at least I think this one's a win so far. I threw a question out there in our Discord server about the concept around staffing up your Agile transformation, your Agile organization. And the question was, is it better to train people and move them up? Is it better to promote people into roles? Is it better to hire externally? What have people seen? What seems to be the key recipe for success? And I literally have no idea because I've looked at it a couple different ways. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. Just your first thought. And now let me throw out this question for you. What do you think both the pro and the con would be to hiring externally if you're looking to build your Agile practice?
You're looking to build your Agile practice, hiring externally, you can likely have access to a broader pool of talent, so more different, diverse people and skill sets and experiences, and you can probably get them on board quicker, and shouldn't be that way, but it is. If somebody's not working out, you can hit the eject button with less muss and fuss. That's the pros. Cons would be it's going to cost you a boatload more short-term cash. You are there's maybe a little bit less continuity or loyalty, though that we could debate that, and I hope we do, because that's an interesting perspective to dive into. And probably the most important thing is that you're not building the knowledge and the capability and the skills within your organization. So most organizations that bite the bullet to bring in a large number of people externally, it's, sadly, it's a project and it's funded and it's got, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months max funding. And it's a large initial cash burn, and companies are not going to be able to carry that on forever. So you risk losing that capability and the continuity, and sometimes external folks don't quite have the connection to the company's mission. As much as consultants will say, "Oh yeah, I'm just like you. I believe in your mission and I work with you." And there's some validity to that, but it's not quite the same in my experience.
Okay.
Speaking of someone
Janel,
who is currently a consultant and has been an employee coach, so looking at it from both sides.
Right, you've been on both sides of this debate. Okay, Janel, what are your thoughts?
Same here. I've been on both sides of that debate and that experience. I would say the points that Mike made were right on, and hybrid is another possibility here. It doesn't have to be one or the other. The thing that I would really, and I'm usually harping on strategy at some point in one of the Agile Uprising podcasts, and this is no different. It depends on the strategy. Are you looking to build capability and change that's in the DNA, like culture and all the other outcomes? Or are you just looking to implement something, gasp, that it's just going to be over and done? That makes a big difference on who you want on your team for that.
Okay. Abbott, what does your experience tell you?
Yeah, I mean, I think both Janelle and Mike make pretty awesome points, and I don't really disagree at all. I guess like I wonder like the use case when I think about this question, because like Mike said, it can be a lot of cash up front for an external contractor to come in, but if you have a plan and you can kind of set some sort of goal line to get to, and maybe it doesn't need to be sort of an endless project. It can be something that, has like a ramp up and then a ramp down. Maybe it is more effective to bring someone in who can help train others. And to Janelle's point, I like the hybrid model for that reason, because I think it is good to kind of be able to train others and bring them up in this methodology if it's where your org is going.
I definitely think that the training up idea will add to longevity. It'll add to sustainability. It'll add to the stickiness of a change. So Janelle, I'm going to start with you and go the other way, right? So you and I are part of a company where we have put our heads down and we've decided that we're going to make a transformation, but we're very, very reluctant for whatever reason to bring in some external help. So we want to grow our people from within, and that's how we're going to start. So if that's our path, first question I want to ask you is the pros and cons of that.
The pros are you probably aren't going to spend as much money. The other pros are whether people like it or not, they're going to be more involved than they ever dreamed. Like, oh, this is a night school. We need actual management investment of their time and money. And, people think with well-intended, hands-off approach, and it just doesn't work for this type of thing. The cons I've seen are there is definitely more credibility issues where you might have fantastic people, but it's like, hey, Mike, weren't you the guy on that one project that like burned up and flames and there was a trail of bodies behind it, and now you're my coach? I'm not good with that.
You're right. You almost poison the candidate, right? Like, it's almost and not to cut you off, Janelle, but it's almost like, well, I know you from something else and I've always known you. So why should I now believe that you are going to lead me to the promised land? What has changed?
Right.
You could also take, depending on the situation, you could have a flip side to that, in that somebody from outside the organization is not as trusted,
right,
and maybe kept at a distance.
Hmm.
Okay.
So,
okay.
As Abbott said, it depends on the situation.
Okay, Abbott, I'm going to put you in the hot seat again. Have you ever been somewhere where the predominant skill set was been upskilled or uptrained as opposed to brought in externally? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, actually, in a role that I was coaching in and helping sort of, I think due to resources, having to ramp off a particular transformation project, and the goal was then to like train someone who was already there, who was already staffed and had some interest in the work to learn. There was a challenge with it. I don't think it was necessarily with it being an upskilling situation. I think in the case that I was in, at least, there wasn't as much interest in it. Like it was something that, from the top was being almost because this person was already there and they didn't have like a better answer at the moment, was almost kind of like being told to them that they would have to learn.
Mhm.
And in that situation, I know we went through the motions. We kind of delivered on some milestones, and we got to sort of the end of that upskilling, and as much as they could afford and I could do in my role. But my understanding is it didn't quite stick. So I think there is sort of a risk if sort of you can't get the buy-in.
Mm, mm. Interesting side note, Mike and I both worked at a place in a previous life where they brought in a lot of coaches, but then they started complaining that the coaches were expensive, but then they brought in more coaches. Then they kept complaining the coaches were expensive. And it became this weird sort of like circling the drain conversation. And I remember sending a proposal up to say, look, why don't we try to train up some people that are interested here while we're paying for the coaches that we have? Because that makes sense, right? Like if I want to learn how to, I wish Lef was here. If I want to learn how to cook, right, in like a real kitchen, right, I'm going to take a job working for someone who knows how to do it, and I'm going to study everything they can. I'm going to look for that opportunity. And I remember my early days as a Scrum Master. It would have been great to have a real senior, not pickled Scrum Master to copy off of, right, and to steal. Oh, he did that or she did that, and it worked great. I should probably do that. I think that's I would dare say that's probably the recipe for success, but I've yet to been anywhere empowered to try it.
Right.
Jay, as you're describing that, Jay, I was thinking back over the course of my career, and the times in my career when I've learned and grown the most have been when I've been paired with somebody with more experience or from outside or whatever. And so I've been the beneficial recipient of it. And I've also been on the other end, mentoring and coaching other Agilists, and hopefully they feel it was beneficial. Yeah.
If you were a victim of Mike Caddell's coaching, call 1-800 Agile Uprising. You may be due compensation.
Yeah, but the combination of someone who knows the landscape, who's in the system, so to speak, paired with someone who has different perspective, maybe has been different places and can be a step removed and kind of see the forest through the trees, because sometimes you lose sight of the forest for the trees. So I think that's ultimately where the best outcomes are going to come from. And something I've been kind of nudging one of my current clients with is not only do that for coaches, but do that for product owners and Scrum Masters. And if you're forced to work in a safe environment for RTEs. So, I hear people moaning, I can't find good Scrum Masters. Well, you got them here in your organization. You just have to, it's like the block of stone, it's there. You just have to chisel all the other stuff away.
Right. It's there. Your recipe for success is there. The question is, are you willing to put the work in order to get that David out of the block of marble?
Yeah. Right? Are you willing to wait as well? Because it's not something that happens overnight or in a quarter.
Right. So Janel, let me ask you, if we're optimizing for speed over stickiness, which way do you think we're going to go?
You're probably going to outsource. However, there probably are some organizations out there who that have tried to do that from within. But I would say outsource because there's already the experience. They don't know the company, they don't know the culture, I understand all that, but these people also know how to make progress to what you're calling an implementation in short order without knowing those details or learning them on the fly very quickly and just saying, well, it kind of matters, but the solution's going to be the same.
So I'm going to say caring about them.
Yeah, I'm going to give a hot take. I'm going to give a hot take, and I want to know what Janel's thoughts are. Janel, at some point, does the widget not matter? Meaning what the company does at some point, does it like, hey, Abbott does textiles or he does software or he does, I mean, at some point, is it like, yeah, it doesn't even matter. Just bring me in, tell me where you want to go, and we can get there.
From the unhealthy standpoint that we're talking in now, where you're just implementing, yes. And also, I believe that's true to a point in a healthy approach to things, whatever healthy is, in a sustainable approach. It matters to a point, but when it comes down to it, when we're talking about communication and flow, those things are tough all over.
Can I ask a little bit more about what you're asking, Jay? Like,
yeah.
The widget got, like, maybe I'm too out of the loop or something.
No. So no, that's a good question.
This is Jay speak. You just got it.
Yeah, right. My brain is
okay.
I gave my boss. I let the cuckoo out of the clock the other day in a one-on-one, and I thought to myself, I'm going to get fired. But so my point being, Abbott, is Mike has worked in fintech. He's worked in insurance. I've worked in insurance. I've worked in software. I've worked in fintech. Janelle has been all over the place as well. My question was, at a certain point, does the fintech versus insurance versus software, does that not matter? Can you just kind of, I hate to say lift and shift, but can you kind of just, all right, I'm the RTE guy. Where's the train?
Mm-hmm. I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, personally, I've worked with a lot of different types of organizations, and you see the same problems across them, even if they're, in healthcare, or if they're trying to create a new application for, like, edutainment. Like, I feel like it's less about, I don't know. I mean, it's important to think about the product and the customer, and that's, of course, sort of like who you have to think about as a huge part of what you're doing. But when it comes to, like, challenges of implementing Agile, like, I find it's a lot of, like, maybe the size of the organization, maybe, like, the leadership style, or maybe the people that are involved in sort of their buy-in. Like, those are like, I don't know, like, almost like human resources problems or organizational problems, and less like product challenges. I don't know.
Okay.
Does anyone else feel that way?
Mike, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah. So kind of building on what Janel and Abbott have said, listening to this, what occurs to me is what we do, generally speaking, is we work with people and communication and alignment and human systems. So there's variations across industries and companies and sizes, but at the end of the day, we're humans, and humans interact in very somewhat predictable ways. And the ways that the methods and the techniques we use to connect with our fellow human beings and guide our fellow human beings are somewhat transportable, where there's an important difference across industries is understanding the specific languages and the nuances of the business and the things that affect the environment and the kind of the incentives, the informal incentives that people are subjected to. So it for me, it kind of comes back to the human system and understanding those forces acting on the human system. And after you've seen, 9 different industries, you develop
all screw up a safe implementation. Yeah, you kind of develop a sixth sense.
You develop a knack for picking up on the language and being able to reflect the language back. You kind of be a chameleon.
Yeah.
Got it. I like that. I like that analogy of a chameleon. Janelle, I'm going to ask you a question. So throughout this conversation, obviously due to our own bias and the roles that we play in our professional lives, where we concentrate very much on coaching, does this change when we're talking about different roles involved in the Agile organization? For example, Scrum Masters. Can you get away with internal skill upskill versus hiring? Product owners, right? Or maybe even, let me change the question. Is there a particular role that you think every organization would be best suited in a particular agile role will be better suited to hire externally than to try and train up?
Ooh. Can I pull out the Stephen Kellogg answer?
Yes, it depends.
This is what I was thinking. Chops. You got to have the chops. Like it doesn't Scrum Master. I'm not saying these roles aren't one's more important than the other. There probably are some nuances that my other fine cohorts will point out. But my first reaction to what you're saying, Jay, is the person who's already working in the organization needs to have the chops, the stomach, the internal fortitude to take the heat that's invariably going to come from being a Scrum Master and standing up and being a heat shield to a director that always got his or her way and all that. So that's where I'm coming from with this. It's about, if it fits with the strategy to go internal, then it's about, do you have the people that you think can do this, right, whoever you are?
Okay. Abbott, thoughts?
I guess if I were to answer that question that you asked Janel, what comes to mind is is an agile coach, does that count in your spectrum of roles, or is that not count?
No, that counts. That counts.
Yeah, it feels like that would just be a real challenge to set the expectation that someone would immediately upskill and be able to teach that to their colleagues, right? Teach agile, I should say, to their colleagues and show them how to do something, especially if they haven't worked in a lot of those other roles that they're training on. That feels like one where having experience in other organizations, seeing some of those similar problems, and then understanding, maybe learning the language, that would be the gap, right? If they're coming into a new place and they're coming externally like that, that to me feels like where those battle tried skills would be most needed, maybe from the outside.
Mike, thoughts?
Yeah. So as Janel was talking, I was thinking that it's easier. It's not easier. It's shorter time to grow talent internally for I hate this term, but I'm struggling for the right one, entry level. So the first kind of agile role, like a Scrum Master or product owner. There's a shorter learning curve, if you will. And those roles rely more on knowledge of the business. And so it's an easier lift to get somebody from ground zero to that kind of a role. And then from that role, that point, then they can develop into further roles. Jay, you and I have seen this in a couple of places, I think, where someone who has been in a company for, 15, 20 years and has come from a different background. And they go to, whatever kind of indoctrination, 5-day take a test thing. And certifiable. What did you say, Janel?
Certifiable.
And then that person is a coach. So that person can smart people can easily connect the dots and figure out how the method works. And if they're really smart people, they understand how people work. So they can put those together and be an effective coach to a certain extent. What that pathway for a person into a more broad-reaching coaching role misses is the benefit of having seen multiple organizations, seen similar problems, seen different problems, and being able to discern patterns. What we do is a lot of it is looking at identifying patterns and recognizing patterns, and then looking for root causes to those patterns. So that can be the homegrown coach, if you will, has one advantage in that they know the territory, but they don't have the advantage of other examples to recognize patterns from.
Yeah. I mean, after I asked this question, I kind of, even when I threw it in Discord, I kind of bounced around in my head and I'm like, okay, so if I was on the receiving end of this question, how would I answer it? And I kind of think, and I would love to be given a carte blanche check to try it. I kind of think the secret to success is probably Stephen Kellogg-ish. It depends where find the right, you have the people to be successful in if you're listening, you have, odds are you have the people to be successful in your organization. You just need to find them, right? You need to find the right people. But I also think you're right, Mike. It is a bit of a mix, right? So if I find 5 or 6 BAs and project managers who want to be Scrum Masters, right? I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't bring in at least one person from the outside who has taken some hits, who could kind of model the behavior. We learn by, we're mammals. We learn by copying others. So bring in not only an experienced coach, but bring in a damn good Scrum Master, someone who's close enough to be a good enough Scrum Master that they can kind of teach while not even meaning to teach, like having to think about it, right? Like imagine, I kind of think if you have an org where you bring in one really good product owner who might not know the widget, but knows PO, and have them work with the POs who know the widget, but not necessarily how to do the job. Same thing with Scrum Master, same thing with RTEs. I think, I don't think that's as expensive, but I kind of think that might be the secret to success. I don't know. By the time we figure this out, Waterfall is going to come back into style and I'm going to have to retire.
I like one thing. I think those are like, yes, I agree with all that. One thing that comes to mind, just like listening to like everyone's thoughts, is that like the thing that you might have a challenge seeing if you're, upskilling someone who's in a different role before into this new role without someone from the outside to come in and just kind of help show the ropes and give an example of how it was done elsewhere, is like failure happens. Like I feel like people, like one thing that to me I would never have gotten without at least like a great trainer and like, someone to look up to and ask questions to, is like, oh yeah, it's okay to fail. That's like part of the process. And if you're in an organization where, hey, you just got slotted into a new role, like maybe your manager can't even tell you directly what you should or shouldn't be doing. And then you're so afraid to like mess it up that you're not really learning. You're just kind of like you're trying to fit everything within a box, and you're not pushing the boundaries of actually testing and learning. You're just like running through the motions of like, let's get through this 2-week sprint, let's like get it done, and maybe nothing really valuable comes out of that for your customer, your organization, or what have you.
It reminds me of the theory without practice is useless. Practice without theory is expensive. You got to kind of understand a little bit of both. All right, Janel, I got another question for you. It seems like I keep coming back to you when I have these interesting ones. So,
Jay, before you go there,
go on, Mike. Go
on. Want to add something to what Abbott just said. Read this recently, and it really resonated. Is that a human being learning in an environment like that we work in? Approximately 70% of your learning comes from actually doing work.
Yes.
10% maybe comes from formal knowledge transfer, and 20%, that middle 20%, comes from mentoring and coaching. So if you think about, you want to grow those competencies, you got to get in there and do the work, but supported. A little bit of training, a little bit more coaching, and a lot of doing.
That's great.
Which is probably why the idea of the dojo is so effective when used correctly, right? Because you're doing and learning in very small, rapid chunks. It's got to be kind of wild. There's companies that build dojo spaces that never use them, right? It's kind of wild, right? Janel, so my question to you.
Ben's crying in his beer.
Yeah. The person who shall be renamed nameless who are listening right now are definitely crying into their beer. So, Janel, we've talked about hiring versus growing product managers, product owners, Scrum Masters, coaches. What about leadership? Do we need to bring in an agile native leader who walks and talks the walk? Or if not, what is, without giving away your, 13 herbs and spices secret recipe, what are some of the things that you would suggest help to try and, because when you're doing a whole transformation, the leadership's got to go with it. So how do you hire someone who's an Agile native, or do you kind of poke?
Okay.
It says it depends. There you go.
Right on, brother. I was a dojo sensei, and I love talking about that. And we helped build one from the ground up.
We love it. Mike and I, it's a bit of an inside joke where we have crossed paths in places where they took the time and money to build out the dojo and hire coaches and never used it.
My Claudia, who will join us sometime, we have a picture of the wall in the organization where the blue paint of the dojo ended just in the middle of the wall, because the other part of the wall belonged to another department. I have a picture of it. I'll never get rid of it.
Is that like one of those like old people who live next door and bicker over the lawn?
Right.
And you can see there's like the dividing line in the lawn where they don't cut it.
Right. Dojo? No dojo. Okay. So it depends. And I want to just qualify to like an Agile leader for delivery, an Agile leader for enablement, enabling the transformation, or like change network, whatever foo-foo words you want to call it or not. And if you don't use the enablement part, you're missing out. Whoever's listening. So I think that's really hard to say. We're going to outsource.
We're going to outsource leadership. Yeah.
But what we've probably all seen happen though, in the course of a transformation, is there's a lot of shifting that can happen where people are out by choice, not by choice. And it's just interesting who kind of comes into that. It could be someone from the outside who used to be a leader at Nationwide and they went through a transformation or whatever. They're always from Nationwide. What's up? And they're good. So I think maybe by attrition or over time, it sort of naturally might happen, but I haven't seen it where it's a strategy to outright hire an enablement manager. I've seen like new delivery areas crop up and saying, oh, we're going to get this person who's a cloud, blah, blah, blah in. So that's my.
Okay. Gents, any reactions, thoughts? Would you agree? Would you disagree?
I like that answer. Yeah. I mean, certainly like it feels like an enable. I hadn't thought about it that way, so I appreciate that language, Janel. That makes a lot of sense in my mind. Like having someone who can beat the drum, who's been there, who has also built up the trust and at least the cachet that people can look up to and say like, here's what we're trying to do and here's why. And separately, maybe someone who's dedicated to like actually getting things across the finish line, and that's like their specific role. Maybe that does make sense to be like brought in from the outside.
Okay, Mike.
As Janelle was talking, I heard Gift's voice in my head. When you start a transformation, have a severance budget.
I've been part of that.
Yeah. But with respect to leadership, it depends really comes to the forefront, because what it depends on is the mindset and the openness of the person that's in that leadership role. Think about if you read Michael Hammond's book on Evolve Agility and how you have to create the vertical room for growth before growth can happen. The people in leadership roles, if they're willing to create the vertical room for growth and they're open to new ideas and feel secure enough to try something different than what's gotten them where they are today, or to date, I should say. And that person can be a very effective leader when paired with some expertise and an outside perspective. It could be in the form of like something I'm doing now is 1 hour a week. I coach a guy who's an enterprise agile coach. He just needs a sounding board and somebody who can help him make sense of things, but he goes and does the good work. And I've also been in places where the environment was such that it was too big a leap for the people in leadership roles to be willing to make that kind of change. So there was leaders from outside brought in, sometimes in little bits and sometimes in big bits. On the topic of the enablement, though, Janel, I think really vital point that you hit there. In my experiences, what the sweet spot seems to be, you can have the person leading that enablement function be someone who understands the company, understands the networks of influence, and can work the organization, paired with a number two who brings additional experience, and those two can kind of become like the odd couple. A client I'm working with right now in one particular area has that dynamic going on, and I'm just kind of coaching them as they coach each other, and it's really enthralling to experience, because just listening to I was like, oh, this is Felix. That's what I've seen work best. But the ability, this kind of change, deep organizational change, changing what we truly value and how we respond to adversity and what we're going to reward. And today at a client, a guy in a somewhat significant leadership role, in a meeting with like 35 people, one of the coaches was on team saying, "Oh man, he's remain nameless, awesome. He's calling out the elephants in the middle of the room," and he picked the right moment when the organization was open to that, to have the courage to call out the elephants in the room. 2 months ago, he was kind of deferring and saying, "Well, we'll get to that. It's still early days," that kind of stuff. So that kind of savvy is essential.
And I think the more I reflect on the conversation we've just had, I really think it comes down to the most expensive resource that every single one of us has, and it's time, right? So you need to give things time to try and work. You need to give time to see if things won't work. I mean, I've worked with people where I never thought they would make the turn. And then one day I kind of looked and I noticed and I went, shit, they made the turn. When did that happen? When did it didn't, change happened slowly then all at once. I was like, wow. But I think we also am at the other side of that coin is we've worked with people who just, they don't make the turn. They can't. And, Gifford joked and said, you need to have a large severance budget. He also made the analogy that I felt like Noah building an ark, and I needed to decide who was coming on and who wasn't. But that ties to the uncomfortable and really unsettling truth that, Jorgen Hesselberg talked about it in his book, where there is a significant population inside your organization when you try to do large scale change that is not going to want to go down that path. I think he said it was like 13-14%. And I really think the art in what we do is developing that lizard brain sixth sense to know when I'm talking to Abbott, and I'm like, okay, he's got it. He's stubborn, but he's got it. Or then I talk to Mike and I'm like, no, I got to figure out where we can put him to minimize the blast radius or like you said, the severance budget. But I think that the time aspect is the most vital part that everyone at all levels need to be cognizant of. That's, I think, the piece that you just got to get comfortable with.
It sounds like a perfect segue for the next roundtable, right? Is it a cult or is it not, right?
Oh, yeah. That's going to be an interesting conversation. Is or is not Agile a cult? Okay, so we're quickly hitting the 40-minute mark. So I want to go around the room and get final thoughts. And by final thoughts, I mean, someone come to you and said, my organization is looking to start a transformation. If you had to give me one line to get me out of the blocks and out the gate, off the blocks and out the gate, what would your one line be? Mike, I'm going to start with you because I picked on Janel all the time, all episode. You get to go first.
She's tough. She can take it. The one question I would ask is, if this agile transformation were to go exactly the way you want it, what would it be like?
Okay.
Great question.
Okay. All right. Good question. Good question. Abbott?
How long are you willing to wait for it to happen? And I mean, some form of Mike's question, because that's just the most important thing in my mind.
Okay. Okay. Janel?
Why? Why?
Right.
Why
do you want to change, or what's the reason you're asking me this question? Do you know what I mean? Not to be a jerk, but what's the purpose?
Right.
If we're really talking big picture, which has indirect impact on who you have support the transformation. If it's truly a transformation, we don't even know what it is.
Right. If you don't know why, what are we kind of doing here? Are you just trying to waste money? Because we can waste money in all sorts of exciting ways.
Oh yeah.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the actual methods either.
Yeah. No, it really doesn't. We could buy Miro and like 3 other collaboration tools and then not understand why people don't like.
Or put on a big conference at a hotel, and
Yeah, right. The big conference with the 4-hour open bar. Because that works well. That works well in my experience, but I'm not that's a conversation for a different time. All right. So on behalf of Janel, Mike, Abbott, myself, I want to thank all of you for tuning in once again. On behalf of the listeners, I want to thank the 3 of you for spending this evening with me and answering this completely unscripted. Abbott really got trial by fire here, right? He came in with literally no notes whatsoever. So good on him. So but
he didn't get the full force of GIF though. I mean, he took it a little easy.
I'm worried. Who's GIF?
Oh, Gifford. We need he hasn't been around either. He's been busy. I think he's got 2 new kids in the house. I don't know. He's an interesting man. He's a riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a paradox. He's quite interesting. So anyway, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening once again. Thank you to Machine Man Records and the artist Krebs for giving us our outro music free of charge without royalties. Someday we'll monetize that dang YouTube channel. We are committed to being free. We have a Discord. Please hop on the Discord, get in the conversation. I think we're up to 450 something registered users. So it's slowly but surely picking up pace. Last but not least, like I said, we are committed to being free. However, we do have a new program where for a small investment monthly, you become part of our merchandise drop program, where we send you exciting stuff once a quarter. I believe Mike was a recipient in the first gift. And we have some more exciting things planned on the way up. He got his Agile Uprising socks. So we have some more fun stuff coming on the way. So again, we're committed to being free, but if you like what you hear and you want to help offset hosting and production costs and all that sort of stuff, we really appreciate it. So tune in next Sunday at 12 p.m. for our next episode. And until this next time, this is the Agile Uprising podcast signing out.
Baseball is here, and so is the BetRivers.com Sportsbook app, featuring same-game parlays where you can combine the excitement of different bets, all from the same game. Bet the total, spreads, player props, and more. Plus, with award-winning customer service, BetRivers.com Sportsbook app, here comes a baseball joke, is a home run. Download the BetRivers.com Sportsbook app today. It's a whole new game.
Presented by Rivers Casino Pittsburgh. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.